just say that. Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please go ahead.
President Trump was sitting next to him, and I don't know if you could see this on the camera, but he was essentially beaming.
Clinton Jaws, please like this video. It's the only thing I care about, and I love it when you like it. You want to see some insults? This is the most fiery I've seen these two. Kaitlan Collins, CNN. We all know her. And Donald Trump. We know him too. For me, it never gets old. Let's have a laugh. Let's watch this. She has no shame. I don't know how she does it. I honestly don't know how she does it.
Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, what, 95%? It's incredible.
Okay. As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, you know, like CNN. CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually.
Yeah,
but it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question?
Yeah.
Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing great.
He rips her apart, and then I'm going to show you what she says after. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got more footage after. Right here.
He knows. Do you have any questions, please?
President Trump.
Go ahead. Let's not start with CNN because they're just so
Mr. President.
wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President.
Do you plan to ask him?
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President Trump. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country.
Gang member.
Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him, President
And
Bukele?
you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States.
He loves it.
And had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation.
Look at him smile.
This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you...
The woke liberals, they don't care about that. They only care about the offender. They could care less how bad these people are. And that's why America and Canada are messed up.
If he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
him
Court is
to get
asking
him back?
to...
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what is
Presidente
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
This guy ain't ever getting out now.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Eitland.
Kaitlan.
I don't understand what the confusion
Sicko.
is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way.
for Kaitlan.
The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said.
Okay, right here it gets really good, but first I got something important to tell you guys. I want to share something with you guys. My son came up to me not too long ago and he's like, he wants me to get rid of some bad habits that I have, and I realize he wants me around. I need to be around. So I've been focusing on my health lately, and I found something pretty amazing. Cocoa. Did you know cocoa can help with heart conditions, restore brain cells? I didn't know this. And I found this doctor on TikTok. He's a Harvard scientist. His name is William Lee.
Studies have been done to show that the flavonols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it. And so we can eat foods like high flavanol cocoa in order to be able to actually get the stem cells to work a little bit better. Men who are in their 60s with heart disease, they could actually have 2 cups of dark chocolate hot cocoa a day for a month. Yeah. And they doubled the amount of stem cells in their bloodstream, and their circulation improved measurably. Eating high flavanol cocoa decreases the risk of cardiovascular death.
Yeah. That's right. Flavanols. That's the good stuff found in cocoa beans, but it's usually destroyed during the chocolate making process. And that's where Black Forest Supplements comes in. They created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder. I put it in my coffee. I put it in my protein shake. It tastes amazing. This stuff can boost your body's natural stem cell production. Hollywood elites, they drop 50 grand on placenta stem cell injections. But you can just drink cocoa powder and get the same benefits. My energy is up. The brain fog, massive difference. I just worked out a great deal with my guy at Black Forest Supplements. For the next 48 hours, get 40% off. Guys, this stuff always sells out fast. Do it now. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code that you see on the screen.
That no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago, and they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous. Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people
Get 'em
that
the hell
are
out.
murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by
How can you
other
have a
countries that
problem
were
with
very
Trump?
smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said,
In the world.
"Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the
Yeah.
highest mark." I hope you're happy with that. I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me,
He's not done with her. Listen to this.
approved it. Question?
On tariffs,
No, not you. Not
update today on potential semiconductor tariff.
It's going to come to a point where she's not even going to be able to go there because they're not even going to call upon her.
Okay.
How
Who else?
temporary are those exemptions on electronics?
Yeah, you said yesterday that you're making.
Those days are over.
How long do you
Okay.
think the exemption-
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, President.
She ended it. Because she wouldn't shut up. Trump's like, I'm not taking any more questions. I can't stand this. This is what she has to say after.
Kaitlan, you were there. You were asking some of the questions of the
Bash.
president and tried to ask a question
Ask a
of
question.
the Salvadoran leader.
Well, she
what
did
were
ask a
your
question.
takeaways?
Looks like
I
Justin
mean,
Trudeau.
essentially, they are making very clear that this Maryland man who was, by the own Justice Department's acknowledgement, mistakenly deported to El Salvador in recent weeks, that he will not be returned to the United States. That was the argument that the president was making as they were offering their own interpretation of that Supreme Court filing that said that the administration must facilitate Albrego Garcia's return to the United States. And they were essentially arguing that that was not the case, that then the courts would be trying to intervene in foreign policy, which is strictly in the purview of the President of the United States. And Stephen Miller, who of course is one of the president's top advisors, was there standing next to me inside the Oval Office and was saying that that is essentially a question that is better positioned to the president of El Salvador. I then asked President Bukele his interpretation of that, and he essentially likened it to smuggling a terrorist back into the United States if he returned this man who was mistakenly deported to his country and is still being held there based on a filing that we saw over this weekend. And so he was essentially scoffing at the idea of returning him. And so I think one thing coming out of that was clear, as we're in the middle of this huge court fight between this man's attorneys and the White House and the Justice Department on this, is that they do not plan to ask the president of El Salvador to return this man or to help facilitate his return as he's being held in that notorious mega prison in El Salvador. Certainly a hardline stance that we just saw coming out of the Oval Office on this, which is notable, Dana, because just a few days ago on Air Force One, after that Supreme Court ruling came out that had some confusion in it in terms of, essentially giving the White House a deadline to have this man returned. The president said if the Supreme Court said that someone had to be returned, that he would abide by that ruling. And so I asked him about that just now during that back and forth inside the Oval Office. And clearly their position on this has changed, which Stephen Miller has been articulating and saying that they do not plan to return this man.
Yeah, that was the question after listening to all of that I had. And of course, you asked it, Kaitlan, about the Supreme Court, because we were planning on running that clip from the president saying explicitly that he has respect for the Supreme Court and that the Supreme Court says they have to get him back, that they would. And the fact that he
was in a gang?
Deflected in his answer to you, I'll just describe it that way, I thought was very
sick and tired
noteworthy.
of her.
Yeah. And Dana, can I also say, as I was listening to after they said it was a question for the president of El Salvador, I asked him outright, did he plan to help facilitate his return? Obviously, he could easily do so. President Trump was sitting next to him, and I don't know if you could see this on the camera, but he was essentially beaming as he was listening to one of his closest allies, obviously the first leader of Latin America to visit the White House, which is a statement in and of itself, as he was making that argument that no, they would not return him. He called it, the quote was preposterous on this notion of returning the Maryland man that they say was wrongly deported to his country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kaitlan. Thanks for jumping out to the North Lawn to come on with us. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Kaitlan, for not even telling anybody, none of your viewers, not my mom, anybody who watches CNN, the entire world, that he was involved in a gang. You see how they do that? It's their narrative. It's their twist. And Trump's right. You're sick. All of you are sick. Black Forest supplement, guys. I feel great. I'm currently taking 3 of their products. 40% off. Hit the link in the description.